Hi, community group leaders and teachers. This is the teaching series extra for March 17th, 2019. We'll be continuing the Essential Jesus series, and this week we'll be looking at the passage of John chapter 1, verses 1 through 18. This is a packed passage. John's gospel is very unique in the way that it opens. John opens with 18 verses of kind of a poetic description of Jesus' true identity. So what the other gospel writers kind of teach implicitly in their gospels, John just says explicitly in the opening verses of his gospel. And there's so much here, so probably your biggest challenge this week will be, how do we cover everything that's here? So let me just give you 3 things that you might want to cover as you lead your community groups. First, this is probably one of the clearest passages that teaches Jesus is God. And yet, while teaching that Jesus is fully God, it's also teaching that Jesus is distinct from the Father. John opens with, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." And so the rest of the passage just expands how Jesus is fully God, but he's also distinct from the Father. And the belief in the Trinity is central to Christianity, and it's one of the things that makes us so unique. There's no other perspective on the nature of God that sees him as a triune God. And so a good thing to discuss in your groups is, why does that matter? Why does defending the Trinity, and specifically the deity of Jesus Christ, matter? What's on the line there? And then the second thing we see in these opening verses is John describes Jesus with 3 different terms. He calls Jesus the Word, he calls Jesus the life, and he calls Jesus the light. And these are terms that occur, especially light and life, later in the Gospel of John as well. So what does he mean by calling Jesus the Word, the light, and the life? Well, all 3 of these terms highlight that Jesus has a role in the Trinity of revealing what God is and what he does. And so with the term Word, Jesus is being equated to creation, that God created through his Word, and Jesus is that Word. And then through light, the word light, Jesus is the instrument of revelation. God has revealed himself, and God's done that through the light of Jesus Christ. And then the last one, life, is Jesus functions as God's instrument of salvation. So Jesus is the instrument of creation, of revelation, and of salvation. And so when we look in the Bible and we look at everything that God has done to reveal himself, to create, to save, we see that all of that is done through the person of the Son of God and through this man who's now become flesh, Jesus Christ. And so as you talk about that, spend some time talking about how Jesus is the full embodiment of everything that God is and everything that God does. And what an amazing thing that we have a person that embodies all that God is and does. But then the third thing that's in these opening verses is kind of the problem, and that is that John gives us the bad news, that the light and the life and the Word has come into the world rejected it. His own people did not receive him. And it's only because Jesus is not only the light and the life and the Word, he's also the bringer of grace, that we have hope. Because in these opening verses, John also says that because Jesus brings grace upon grace, that those who do receive him, who've been born of God, receive him by believing in his name. So we also get a picture of salvation here. How does Jesus bring salvation? Well, he brings salvation to those who believe, and those who believe do so because they have received grace upon grace in Jesus, and they have been born again, not by the will of man, but by the will of God. So there's a lot to discuss this week, and I hope your discussions are rich and exciting as you talk about the nature of Jesus as God, as the instrument of creation, revelation, and salvation, and as you talk about salvation by grace through faith. Have a great week.